to Waterfront Academy's podcast, and this is a Founder to Founder episode. I'm Melissa Rohan, founder of Waterfront Academy in Washington, D.C., and today we're talking all things Montessori, especially what it's like to take the leap from teaching in a classroom to opening your own school. So my guest today is Fabienne Deaton, the founder of Starling Montessori, right here in Washington, D.C., which opened its doors in the 24-25 school year, and it's now in its second year. Fabienne's school serves toddlers, and she brings such heart and dedication to her work. We'll talk about what first drew her to Montessori philosophy, what inspired her to start her own program, and what she's learned along the way, and where she hopes to go from here. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Fabienne. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to chat.
I know. So, I should say to our audience that if this seems rehearsed, it's because it is. We tried, and I forgot to hit record, so now we're trying again, and it is recording. So,
different will come up this time than the first time. It's hard to,
We're very Montessori. We keep trying.
Repetition.
Repetition, exactly. So with that, I do want to ask a little bit about what brought you to Montessori. Like, what brought you here?
When I graduated from college, I went abroad and I was teaching in a traditional setting, in a traditional educational setting, as an English language teacher. And I did that for many years. And there was this point at which the exhaustion of teaching children in that way kind of got to me, and I was feeling frustrated with traditional settings and traditional teaching. And I really thought that I was going to kind of walk away from education entirely and maybe do something like adjacent, like in a different kind of educational portion, but not like really in front of students, working with students in the classroom. And at that stage, I didn't really know what I wanted to do specifically. So I was kind of, looking and searching. And my mother, who I have to give a lot of credit to, and because she is a Montessorian of like 40 plus years and had raised me as a Montessorian, but I kind of really didn't, when I was in a professional capacity teaching, I didn't really make the connection between my own Montessori primary experience and the education that I was providing in a traditional setting, and like as a professional choice, it didn't really click. And it was kind of at the stage in which I was like, I think I'm going to leave teaching and I'm going to go do something else. That my mother was like, well, I hear all of your complaints about why you're frustrated with teaching like this and why you're frustrated with teaching and education, and great, if you want to do something else, I'm not going to stop you, but maybe while you're thinking about that next step, come and substitute at my Montessori school. And you can see how it feels to be in kind of this Montessori setting and how we do education. And it's funny because we had talked many times about Montessori, but like I said, it just never clicked as this like philosophy of education until I think until I had the experience of being in a traditional setting and realized it didn't feel good and it didn't feel natural. And I felt like I was pulling teeth with the children and the children were not enjoying it and I wasn't enjoying it. That when I went and substituted in a different setting, in a Montessori setting, that I was like, whoa, this is what this is? Like the light bulb went off, kind of like the education can be like this, like children can be this peaceful and this self-driven and like enjoy learning and enjoy this process. Like, this is amazing. And at that stage, it was that I kind of like switched gears and was like, okay, maybe I'll go and do Montessori. So I did my assistance training at the training center in Hartford, Connecticut, which was close to the school where I was substituting. And really quickly after doing that assistance training and like kind of learning more about the philosophy and hearing about Maria Montessori and all of that, and where it started and like kind of where it was, that I like signed up for the next primary training that I could get my hands on. And so it was really, like I said, like it was really this like a process of me going out into the world, working in education as a teacher in a very traditional setting that kind of pulled me back to kind of rediscover almost Montessori for myself and as a profession. Um, and really just as a new way to like reinvigorate the spark I had for with working with young people. I knew I loved working with kids and I love teaching. Like I love the intellectual pursuit of like education and like being in the classroom with children who are so curious. But I really think I had seen that light go out being in a traditional setting and then getting to experience a Montessori setting as a professional. Like it really just reinvigorated me and made me want to pursue that instead of kind of dipping out of education entirely. Um, like I said, I have to give my mom a lot of credit. She was patient. In some ways, I feel like she Montessori'd me. Like she was like, let's just show you. I'll give you the opportunity to experience it yourself. And then, find your, whatever it is, you find your link to the material. And the material was Montessori education as a professional, as a teacher. And so I think she Montessori'd me in her way.
I love that you're using it as a verb.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, my husband and I, we joke, sometimes I feel like I Montessori him, you know, in the way, like, I'm like, well, let me just show you. And then I like how you lead the child to the work and then you allow them the opportunity to experience it themselves, right?
Mm.
It works in all sorts of ways.
Well, it's so funny. There's a book that just came out and I haven't read it. I don't even want to talk about contents of the books. I just saw the title of it and I've heard some people talk about it, but it's talking about using Montessori in the workplace. And I just thought that was so clever. And
Yeah.
I am going to purchase the book and I am going to read the book and I can talk probably a little bit more about what is in the book. But yeah, I saw that it came across my feed and I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Is it called Alignment? Because I met the author at a recent Montessori conference and
yes.
she seemed really interesting, and the book seems really interesting too. And so it's on my nightstand here to read.
Okay, you've got the book already.
Yeah.
You're one step ahead of me.
I can lend it to you when I finish.
So I love that, and I think that like your mother, just like my mother, really played strong roles in us kind of being where we are right now, and I love. There's a lot of really interesting things that are kind of in parallel between both of our stories. And I think that's really interesting. But there's also a lot of really interesting and unique things about your story that I got to learn. And so tell me a little bit about going from teacher to founder. What was it that gave you that ability to make that kind of leap? Because that is a big leap.
Yeah, so I love being in the classroom with children, and I don't know that I'll ever truly leave that piece behind. But I think what happened to me in my Montessori journey, and we often call it a journey because like that's us Montessori thinking about ourselves really critically, is that I had a lot of mentors in my experience teaching and in the schools that I worked in the first couple of years actually that I was working as a lead teacher and a lead guide, who were doing essentially what I'm doing now. They had founded schools of their own. They'd either built them from the ground up or they'd taken them over. One of my first mentors outside of my mother, who I consider a key Montessori mentor, was a woman who founded a Montessori charter school in Philadelphia years ago. It's since no longer in operation, but she worked and founded a school. And so I think working closely with her as a young teacher, a young Montessori teacher, I got to kind of learn from her, like in lockstep, about like what it was like to found a school and the impact you could have on families when you started from the ground up, when you built it yourself, when you kind of built one where there needed to be one, or you were solving a community need for younger children, or for where there isn't a Montessori program at all, or whatever that need might be. And so she was one of my key mentors and still is, and I consider her like a close family member now. And then the second school that I worked in up here in this area, again, I got to work alongside a founder and director who built the school. And when I started at the school, they had been in operation for about, I want to say 8 to 10 years, but it was still a relatively young school. I mean, I think that's kind of what I learned is that, like, even though she had founded it when she was a young mom, um, and and she had gone from teacher to director and founder. And again, I got to see kind of what it looked like and how it was possible and how motivating it could be to really like do it on your own, to solve both whether it's a personal need or a community need or both. And I think for me, it was those mentors who gave me this maybe like a long-term vision of like, okay, one day I might like to do this. And then it was real, true, contextual events in my own life that made me kind of take that leap to the next step. I don't know that I think it would have been like a goal or a dream that I kind of held on to for a long time, always kind of thinking like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm like a little bit of imposter syndrome where you're like, well, I really would like to do this. It seems amazing, but I could never do it. And then it wasn't until I had a real personal need of having my own child, not having a place to bring him, feeling like there was a real lack of toddler programs, even nidos in the city where I could bring my child, and feel confident about the Montessori pedagogy being done in an authentic and a very clear way. That I was like, well, let me see what this kind of like running or starting a program process looks like. And I think originally I had looked into kind of starting it as like a kind of home daycare setting. And that felt really, feasible, especially like at first I thought, okay, I want to start a nido. I have a child who would benefit from having a nido. They're a nido age. Doing it in a home setting is a very, comfortable way to kind of start a program like this. And then we quickly learned that that wasn't possible with like both our building and the coding in DC. And so I kind of put everything on pause for a bit. And it wasn't until I found a location, kind of by accident and through my own process of looking for something for my child, that I learned that there was a space that was going to be available. And I kind of took that leap of like, okay, let me conceptually walk down this road a little bit of like what it looks like if I were to try and build it here, and like how long would that take and what would that look like. It took me about a year from finding the location to actually opening the doors. So we opened the doors in August 2024, but I had found that space in, I want to say like March of 2023, maybe.
Wow. Yeah.
So it took a while, and the space needed work, and you have to do all of the licensing and all of the work basically to build the program before you even open the doors of the program. And I was on leave essentially. I was working from home, and so I used the time that I had while I was having a little baby in his little sling kind of thing, to kind of do the research and figure that part out. So I think how I took that leap, how I went from teacher to founder was both a combination of having the mentors in my life kind of show me the vision, and then also the timing of like things in some ways serendipitously laid themselves in front of me to say like, okay, I could do this, and this might be the time to do it. And if I wait, it might never happen.
I think that like it takes a lot of faith and courage to like, I mean, I know you said imposter syndrome, but like I think that like it takes a lot of faith and courage to believe in yourself and to know that you are exactly the right person to embark on these new endeavors. And I
Uh-huh.
feel like what you're doing over at Starling is amazing. And I got to tour the space. It's a beautiful space. I have like recommended it to a lot of families that come
Yep.
through here, and they're looking because we're not, for anybody watching, we're only a few blocks away from each other. I walk over there, she walks over here. Like it's a walking trip.
Yep.
and and so it's, and what you're doing over there is, it's beautiful. The space is beautiful. I know that it's quality. It's just quality. And you're absolutely right that like finding a place that's truly Montessori for that younger group of children, it's very hard to find confidently, right?
I think what I have discovered in this process is that you're balancing both like the Montessori philosophy, what's good for like a small business, like what is feasible for us building a small business, but then also what are the licensing and regulations around childcare in the location that you're at, and they're different from state to state. And DC is unique in its regulations, and they're very different from like Virginia or Maryland. And I've worked in Virginia, and so some things that like flew or worked possible there are not possible here. And so it's adjusting and finding ways to make your toddler program authentic as possible, given all of the like, in some ways, constraints that make it more challenging, and especially do certain things that you might want to do with toddlers that in a traditional daycare setting you just can't do, or they don't let you do. So for example, toileting is something that we're big in early childhood education, but in traditional daycare settings, they wear the diapers until maybe 2, and then they start the process. But we want to start it earlier. And so what does that look like? And how do we work with the city to like explain this is what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, and we're maintaining all of the regulations that around health and safety that are still required, but we want to do it like this because our philosophy tells us and shows us that children are more successful when we do it like this. So sorry, that's a segue. And toileting is on my mind a little bit because we're doing a parent event, and I'm also working on a waiver with Aussie about toileting. So it's like,
no, but I think it illustrates exactly what Montessori leaders have to go through. It is kind of like, piloting a ship, there are real things. And, the longer you're around, the more things that you have to be cognizant of. So, for example, I like to, when I troubleshoot with my staff or with my parents, we'll like, okay, here's the problem. What are some solutions to this? And they'll offer a bunch of solutions, and they're all amazing solutions. Like, I don't think that like any idea is a terrible idea, and I feel horrible saying, well, I like the idea. Here are the issues. And I'll name, okay, this is this, and this is this, and I'll name all the different things. And it's like, I have it all in my head. It's so and I'll be, and it's a little frustrating, I would imagine, for some people. And I think that is something that is required of a leader of a Montessori school, is to navigate all of those different things and pilot the ship. Kind of, when you're small, it's easy to be nimble and you can kind of go like this, but I think, the longer you are, the more of those things you're aware of, and it makes decision making, like you said. If you're running a business, half the stuff we do, any business owner would be like, well, that's nuts. Like, why are you doing it that way?
But like, I think there's definitely, it's really important, I think, that I have been a teacher and been in the classroom, and that I'm still in the classroom, because I think that does guide a lot of my decisions. And I think there's a delicate balance of, okay, yeah, we could be like a everyday childcare center, right? We, the age group wise, like we could just get kids in and do generic care, right? But that's not why I started the program. That's not what like the goal of, me being a founder is, but also the school is. And so I think it's a very delicate balance of Montessori and making fiscally responsible decisions and decisions that benefit the program in the long run, and also saying no when push comes to shove, and saying like, well, yeah, I have 12 spots, but does it benefit the children that I have in the classroom and the teachers, or the Montessori environment, the normalization that we're seeking, and the children that have this unique needs that they have in the space that we have, to add 2 more children? Or should we stay where we are now and wait a little bit until we've reached a new level of normalization before we pull in another student? That's just an example. And I liked your analogy of the ship, right? You're piloting the ship, and I've talked before about like the airplane, like that we're flying an airplane, like in building small business, building the school has felt a lot flying the airplane while you're building it, like you're adding the wings and the tail engine, and like building the systems while you're operating, because you don't realize you need the system until you like realize you don't have it, right? Essentially.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely in this first year of the school, there were decisions I had to make about whether it was enrollment numbers or hiring or uh, toileting, or like the ways in which we go between diapers and underwear and those sorts of things that I recognized were the decisions we had to make in the moment, because we were surviving and we were getting off the ground, we're taking off, we're just trying to like get ourselves into the air. And now that we're in the air and the plane is essentially flying, and it's piloted and it's moving forward, that we can adjust, right? We can change out certain things. We can, I don't know, we can make the seats a different color or add more rows of seats, right? So it's been a process. And I think I have a vision, a very specific vision of how I want the school to be and how I want it to grow. And I recognize that I can't accomplish all of that in year one, or maybe even year two. But that the fact that I have that vision and that I'm working towards it, I think is key. And having had the experience of being a teacher, also being a parent, and having these mentors in my life who have really, championed me and said like, yes, the vision is key, and your vision is amazing and you'll get there. I think that also keeps me flying in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this because it kind of leads right into my next question about what are some of the lessons that you learned from the first year that
Yeah.
you are now using in your second year, making it hopefully slightly easier. Easy is like not really the word, but
Yeah. I think lessons. I mean, I feel like there's constantly, like, I have lessons every day about like, okay, I'm learning how to use this, and some of them are really simple about like, oh, this system doesn't work, or maybe that wasn't the best choice for like a software program that we're using. I think some of the biggest lessons had to do around, and maybe the one of the hardest things for me in the process of the first year is recognizing and coming to terms with how difficult it is to find good people who are committed to doing this alongside me, essentially staff, finding good staff people who believe in Montessori, who believe in what we're doing, are willing to take the risk of working at a small school that is just growing and might not have all the bells and whistles of, a bigger program, or even just a bigger childcare center. Some of these big childcare centers that have multiple locations, they can offer certain things that we can't. And we're small and we're growing. And it's not that we can't offer certain benefits. It's just that maybe we can't offer them as much as another program. And so finding qualified people, good people, people who are committed and who really love children and want to be in the classroom with me working as hard as I work is hard. I think the first year taught me that it takes a lot longer to find those people than I thought.
yeah.
And a lot more work than I thought. I really thought, oh, there's other Montessorians in this area. DC is a really amazing area for Montessori. Just in general, there's training centers, there's a lot of schools, there's a lot of awareness of Montessori in many ways, but still, it's been a challenge to find those people. That's not to say that I haven't. I do have amazing people. And I think I've learned that, kind of like my own journey in Montessori, I have to support the training and professional development and the growth of those individuals who I know are they have the characteristics of a true Montessorian, of Montessorians who maybe they don't have their teacher training, or they don't have all of the training that I do, but they have the heart and they have the ability to learn and to take the professional development that I want to offer them and run with it and become those Montessorians in many ways that that I'm seeking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm going to just offer something here.
yeah,
There's a lot from the small business perspective on strategies for staff, which I think are really great. So there's a woman named Cody Sanchez. She just recently wrote a book and she's got some stuff in there. And then there is, I haven't read it in any of his books, but he's talked about this as well, and that's Alex Hormozy.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of good resources out there right now, because I feel like a lot of the younger generation are looking to start businesses. A while back ago, there wasn't a lot of resources out there that were readily available, but now it's like in your face. And so just to offer a couple of really great resources, I would say that those are the two that come to the top of my mind, but there's several others that I could probably find the books and resources. But I just, just wanted to offer that up.
No,
But yeah, it's a problem that's I think all Montessori schools around the world have is finding quality staff, but it's not just the Montessori schools. I think that like for a Montessori school, it's not just quality staff, it's quality staff that can pass a background check and, and quality staff that I mean, it seems like an obvious, but like
I think I was surprised by, and maybe this is my own naivete and being an organized person as I am, like I was surprised by the number of qualified people who could not get themselves together to do the paperwork, the upfront paperwork that is required to work with children in the city of DC. And
oh
that's,
yeah, yeah. Oh, I agree. And like, and then the qualifications on top of it to be, I
yeah,
mean, you you even like as you were mentioned, just a regular daycare, not a Montessori daycare, you still need to have a lot of credentials just to do that. So then when you add this additional layer of being in a Montessori program, then there are additional qualifications that we're looking for to be a quality school. And so I think that that's very important to that I think that the average person wouldn't necessarily realize that it's hard finding staff. That's true for all small business. And then on top of it, finding staff that you can actually put into your program that meets all of the other qualifications and criteria. It's extremely hard. And then you're like looking for some very specific personalities
right.
to be in the program. And for me specifically, and I think what you're also mentioning is that we're very mission driven. And so people that we bring into the programs have to be mission aligned. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really it then like makes it very, very hard. So you're looking for that like unicorn.
Yep. Needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
I think I'm more tough-skinned now about it than I was a year ago, where every time like the hiring process didn't turn out well, I felt much more personal about it. But like I think now I'm in a different place about it. And so in terms of like something that I've learned, that this process, this part of being a director and running the school has been probably my biggest learning curve. And the biggest, and it's funny, like I was part of hiring at my previous school and I enjoyed the interview process and getting to know people, but just when you're doing it on your own and you're like desperate to find someone to be in this school with you and to help you and to figure it out with you and who's committed to your mission and is qualified, it feels like a real big mission, you know?
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. And it's a big endeavor. Um, you mentioned a little bit about your vision. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what's next for Starling?
Yeah. Um, so I have like the big vision and I have kind of like, I think what's a realistic like 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Um, so I would love, and I think this speaks to kind of where my need came from also. I would love to have a program that includes a nido, a toddler, a primary, and then I'd love to have the spectrum school. Like I'd like to have it all the way from the beginning, all the way to elementary. I think if we eventually got adolescents in there too, that would be great. But I think for me, feeling like we have a holistic school that covers the key planes of development, um, like nido, toddler, primary, and elementary. That would be kind of my long-term vision of the school. I think what I would like to be able to build in the next few years is a primary and a nido, because nido especially meets a community need. It was a need that was very apparent to me when I was a parent with a young child who wasn't 18 months. A lot of programs started 18 months. Um, and there's not a lot of authentic Montessori programs that can have a nido. Originally, like I said, I wanted to kind of start with a nido. And something I didn't mention was when I was going through that process of like figuring it out, it became very clear that you can't run a nido on its own. It's really challenging just for with the adhering to the licensing requirements of teacher ratio to child, the cost of care for children, young children, especially immobile children, children who aren't walking yet, is so much higher because of all the safety regulations and just even getting qualified staff to be in those spaces. And this goes to a whole nother podcast about how we pay staff in childcare and early childhood educators and all that. That's like a whole different conversation we can have.
Yeah.
But it's very clear to me that I couldn't start with a NITO and have a NITO succeed on its own because the ratios, it just doesn't work financially. So you have to supplement a NITO program with programs with older children. So primary and toddler age children can supplement the tuition you can make from those programs, can support the introduction of a NITO program. And then the amazing thing is once you have a NITO program, families, if they're happy with the education, most likely they're going to want to stay. They want their child to have the experience of a community of working with teachers that they know in a space that they know. They don't want to have to do this juggling of okay, 1 year I'm here and the next year I'm in this other place. And so I think knowing that, and even with families we have now who have older children and have younger siblings, they want both children to go to the same space because they don't want to do 2 different drops-offs. That just doesn't work. So having a NITO space and a primary space are kind of my next projects and the projects that I'm working very specifically on. I think the primary program will happen a little bit more quickly just because older children means the spaces that you can have them in are a little bit easier to find and to build, frankly. They can have stairs, for example. So in case you don't know, you cannot have children who are under the age of, I think it's 24 months actually, can't be in a space that has an egress that's below ground level or above ground level. It has to be ground level. And that has to do with safety and fire and safety regulations. And so finding a space that can be used like that is hard. And so, like I said, we were really lucky to find the toddler space that we're in, and finding a place and a way to make it build a NITO is kind of like our next part of that vision. And then the primary also. The primary, I guess, is more immediate because some of our oldest children are getting ready for that. And my son included, who's now almost 3, and they're ready for that next Montessori space. And so figuring out how we can build that and have that ready for them in the next year is kind of an immediate priority for us.
No, I think that's lovely. I love all of it. I think that it's so important for families to realize that Montessori isn't just an under 6. It's a whole continuum, right? And so, yes, it starts all the way from birth. And actually, Dr. Montessori even talks even further. She talks about in utero, right? And so it's kind of amazing, her work, when you read through all of it. But it is a full continuum of the human development, right? And so we develop all the way up to the age of 25. So we, as humans. And so I think that keeping that whole scope in. And I also, and I'm sure you know this, but now they're looking at, and they've been doing this, I want to say, for the last 10 years, looking at Montessori for the aging population as well. It's pretty amazing. And I think that there's some really neat things going on there. I just got, I get a lot of emails and a lot of, but I did, and I don't always read all of it. But I do see the little caption at the top, and so they're doing a big open house for one of these projects down in Texas, and I was like, wow, I would love to go to see that. I can't make it to Texas, and quite frankly, I don't think that the planes would allow me anyways. But yeah, it's kind of amazing what's going on. And I think that you're spot on, where I think families need to understand that it's a whole continuum, and your vision includes that whole continuum. And it really kind of layers nicely on each other. What I think, just to kind of illustrate this, so Dr. Montessori talks about the different planes of development, and each plane is essentially every 6 years, right? So you have 3 years going where you're learning the skills, and 3 years honing the skills, learning the skills, honing the skills. And she's got these cute little peaks and valleys. And she talks about this. But so what that means as far as Montessori on the continuum, that what you're talking about is really the 6 and under, that first plane of development within your next couple of years of operation. And you're absolutely right. You're talking about from the nido to the toddler and through the primary programs. And then like you were also quickly mentioned that further down the line, you're looking at potentially doing the elementary as well. And there's a lot of really great, so what you do in an elementary program is, I wouldn't say vastly different, but it does look a lot different. It feels different. The children are very different. And that's just the development of the child. And then when they go into that third plane of development, which is what you mentioned quickly, the adolescent program, yeah, you're looking at, again, another 6 years, and then the young adults, which takes you up to 25. But it's kind of interesting because you actually do get to see it and be a part of it, and it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I've had toddlers before. I don't have toddlers now, but I've had toddlers before, and they're so wonderful to be around. I just love being around children in general, but the little ones are just, it's so precious. And yeah, so you have the dream job right now. And so yeah, so it's an amazing program, and I love that you're doing that for so many reasons. And I think that we need to just, as founders, and I don't know if this is true or not. Like I've talked to a handful of people, but I do see that like some of them are really opening up to the fact that like it needs to be more than just a primary program. Actually, I was speaking to, and I don't mean to go really dive into this, but I was speaking to an education consultant last week. It was last week. And she mentioned to me, she said, "Oh, have you heard of this other school up in Bethesda? They're doing Montessori." And I was like, I honestly hadn't. And she was like, "Oh yeah, well, they only do it for primary, and then they go into a typical school for afterwards." So it is a full elementary school, and they have the preschool program, but the preschool program is the Montessori, and everything else is like, I'm like, oh, how sad. I didn't say that, God bless.
Like, I mean, but it's a very important point. And some of the things that you've mentioned have brought a few items to mind. The first being that, Montessori is labeled as an educational pedagogy, but like, I think those of us who are in it and who have really like committed our lives to it come to understand it more as like, it is a way to view the world. It is a way to view human development, not just child development, like human development and human relationships, like all of it. Like it's a lifestyle seems simplistic, but like in some ways, when you are doing Montessori at its fullest, you are integrating it into every part of your life. And so it is not just like a primary, like educational box where you have specific materials. And the materials are super important. I'm not trying to bypass that, but it's also the ways in which it's presented, the language we use, how do we engage with children and other people in our lives in a respectful manner. Like a lot of it is centered in respect for the child. But I think if you pull that out and like look at Maria Montessori's broader vision for like humanity, Montessori is about offering respect to all other individuals and learning the ways that we can be better as a society. And so I think, to simplify it is like, this is just a primary education model is too simplistic. And then the other thing you were talking about was like kind of the peaks for the planes of development. And that brought to mind the bulb graph that you see with Montessori that shows kind of, Montessori did this, like she did a lot of graphs. She was very scientific in her process. And one of the graphs that I always loved was the bulb, or I think it was the bulb, the one that shows the, where we put the most emphasis on, where society places the most emphasis traditionally on education and where they put the most focus versus where the most focus should actually be. And I think society is coming around to the realization that the early childhood years are like foundational for for developing the human being. But in her models, she shows that like we put a lot of emphasis on like university and higher education, and we put a lot of money towards that, and a lot of money is spent on those years. But really, all of the skill sets and all of the development that's going to indicate whether an individual is successful at those later years happens in that first plane of development, 0 to 6, like, is so important. And so I think I, as an educator, have come to recognize how important that is. As a parent, I've come to recognize how important that those foundational years are. And so if as a school, like I can get that plane of development right, then I know that I've done something amazing for the children that are in my care.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Erica Kosimer, I'm probably mispronouncing her last name. Are you familiar with her? She's not a Montessorian.
No, I haven't heard of her.
She's not a Montessorian at all. In fact, she's like, don't put your child in a Montessori school. She literally says that. And
okay.
when she's pressed on why not, it makes sense.
Okay.
And the why not is because there are so many Montessoris that are Montessori and not Montessori, and so like deciphering does take a keen eye. But so that is her complaint. Anyways, but the point is that she genuinely talks about those first 6 years and how important it is to the development of the child. And you don't get that back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And the child's brain is largely developed based on those experiences over the first 6 years. Now, then she does talk about in the adolescent years, it's funny because Dr. Montessori talks about how it's very much mirrors those like, first 6.
Yeah, parallel plane.
Yeah. And she talks about that's the second crack at the bat when you can like, anything that you did wrong those first 6 years, you get another crack at the bat at it during the adolescent years. But if you mess up those adolescent years, then again, because it's where your brain really does a lot of the changes. And so you could also go the other way as well. And so she really talks about, she's got 2 books. The first book is like that 0 to 6, and then the second book is on the adolescence. And they're really great. And again, she's she's like, don't do Montessori. But when you press her on it, when I've seen other people press her on it, I haven't spoken to her personally, but when I've seen other people press her on it, she explains why. And it's really because of this Montessori sort of situation that's going on. So
it's the Montessori the whatever else. And so then it kind of gets watered down. And
yeah. So I want to thank you so much for your time and doing it again. What a big favor you did for me. So I really appreciate it.
I had like a totally unique conversation both times, which is like a shame, but like, it's great. Like, I mean, I'm so glad we had this second conversation.
Me too. So Fabienne, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your journey with Starling Montessori. It's inspiring to see and to hear how passion, patience, and vision come together in building a Montessori community from the ground up. If you'd like to learn more about Starling Montessori and her incredible work Fabienne and her team are doing with the toddlers, be sure to check out the show notes because I will include the links and some of these resources that I've mentioned. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Waterfront Academy's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anybody who is dreaming of starting a Montessori school. Until next time, it's Melissa Rohan. See you soon.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.